would like to start with Cynthia, who has made some statements regarding political funding, and also one of the agenda by C4, which is talking about how we want to establish and also ensure that political funding is something which will not be detrimental to democracy, to the choices that people made of their leaders and so on. So, please.
My task is to actually answer or shed some light on the issue of political financing. Is it donation or is it corruption? Now, how many of you were actually shocked to read the first MECC statement that said that the 2.6 billion that was entered into Najib's account was not from 1MDB but was donation? Were you surprised or were you shocked, or did you think that it was something normal? Okay, so you wonder why it didn't come into our accounts, right? Yeah, but okay, so the question here is, Najib is our Prime Minister. So he is entrusted to manage our taxpayers' money, to manage how government conducts its affairs. Now the problem or the challenge in Malaysia is that how money flows into Barisan Nasional's accounts, how money flows into Pakatan Rakyat, formerly Pakatan Rakyat Party accounts, is not regulated. So we have no clue how they actually get money to run the elections. Normally money is needed to run activities, to run elections. So if you look at the dictionary, it says that political financing in terms of definition covers all types of funds raised and spent for political purposes. The main purpose is election. But in the lead up to election, there's a lot of activities that need to be carried out. And this is part of a democracy. So the first thing to establish is that political parties need funds. Now the question is the relationship between the money and the politics and how the money is actually administered. Now in Malaysia, just to set things right, in terms of law, there is no law that governs political financing. So how much money actually flows into party account or personal account of politicians is not regulated. And that is one of the first dangers that could lead to corrupt activities, that could lead to activities that promote poor governance, bad governance. Now the only law that we have that regulates funds to some extent is the Election Offences Act. So for every parliamentarian, they're only allowed to spend 200,000 ringgit during elections for their campaigns and all that. For state assemblymen, it's 100,000 ringgit. So if you add up, we have 222 parliamentary seats and 555 state seats. So the most any political coalition can spend during an election, if you want to contest all seats, like Barisan Nasional does, is up to a maximum of about 95 million or so. Now 95 million and 2.6 billion got big difference or not? Big difference, right? Yeah, so many of us have been asking, so if the money was used to bankroll the last general election, what happened to the balance? So just as we're asking that question, then Sarawak Report releases another piece of news which was pretty shocking yesterday, that said that the money that came in, 2.6 billion, was actually transferred back out to a Singapore bank of about the same amount. So the money trail is actually extremely complicated and it's murky. It's really difficult to figure out. First of all, who paid the 2.6 billion? That's the first question. Some Arab donor. And then the most frivolous excuse that we heard of late is that it is for what? Fighting ISIS, fighting the Islamic State. Can you imagine which kind of Arab donor would be so generous to give 2.6 billion for doing that? So it's like when you tell one lie, you got to keep covering up and tell more lies. So that's the first question that's not answered. 2.6 billion come from where? What was it used for? So as Said Ibrahim read out the questions that were asked and how no answers are actually given. So you ask question A, you get answer B. You ask question A, you get answer C. So this is what has been happening. But more importantly, I think we have seen the country come under tremendous stress and tension. Partly because we're talking about no other than the top public official in the country that has actually, in short, sold out the people's trust by playing with money, by allowing laws such as the Official Secrets Act and various acts that allow government to continue to exercise misconduct and so on and so forth. So this is really a scenario that we are now seeing explode before us. Not something that happened yesterday, but it's happened perhaps from the time of Dr. Mahathir. But now Dr. Mahathir has turned into the chief critic in trying to ask for answers over this. Now, the other thing I wanted to highlight here is the destruction of our public institutions as a result of trying to hide answers around the 2.6 billion donation that was Kononia banked into his account and used for the last general elections. Now, in the last couple of weeks, we have seen the Attorney General changed overnight. We have seen how the MACC officers were arrested. The Special Operations Division was raided. And various threats were issued on the Bank Negara governor and so on and so forth. Now, this is really, really unprecedented. This is really destroying the institutions that are supposed to protect our rights, that are supposed to actually protect how our money is administered and how they should actually look at ways in which they can manage the country better. But instead, these institutions, the persons who are implementing investigations at different levels are being harassed and attacked. And yesterday, the BN Strategic Director had admitted that there was a charge sheet, in his own words, that there was indeed a charge sheet. And if there was a charge sheet, that actually raises some even more grave concerns, because this actually means that Prime Minister Najib had obstructed, very clearly obstructed and tampered with the investigations that were being carried out by the task force. So he dropped his deputy prime minister, he sacked the attorney general, and he actually tried to regroup his team to cover even more lies. So the issue of political financing can actually destroy our country. The issue of money politics can actually destroy our country. And it destroys us because it destroys our political institutions. So there must be something that has to be done. So in the midst of all this, while Najib is not answering questions, on Friday, he announced task force or Jawatan Kuasa that will look at political financing reform and looking at formulating regulations, looking at formulating policies towards political party financing. Now, how many of you actually think that is a good effort? No, I see many of you shaking your head. Now, that's because I believe many of us have lost complete trust in the government that is there today. So until Najib answers these questions of the 2.6 billion, it becomes really shallow speak and really hollow that any kind of measures that he takes now will not actually come out looking like it has the confidence and the trust of the people. Now there is something very interesting, because the Bar Council issued a statement today to say that they will not be part of the Jawatan Kuasa until the 2.6 billion question is actually answered. Now, even though when I mentioned just now that there is no law to regulate political financing, the question of donations is still something that comes under the ACTA, the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission Act 2009. Now, if you look at section 3, the section 3, the issue of donations is actually listed. Hold on, I'm just looking for it. Okay, sorry. The issue of section 3 actually talks about gratification. Gratification includes money, donation, gifts, loans, fee, reward, valuable security, property or interest in property, being property of any description. So the word donation is included in the tafsiran of what MECC can actually investigate. So donations do not free Najib from investigations according to this. Now, what MECC is investigating is to see whether these donations are legitimate or is it not. Because one other ACTA that can be used to investigate donations, whether they are legitimate or illicit, is the Anti-Money Laundering Act. Anti-Money Laundering Act is an act that you can actually utilize between 2 or 3 countries in which you know the money has flowed from an illicit source for an illicit reason. And so that is why the RM 2.6 billion is not free from investigation. Then section 17 of the MECC Act, if you read it together with section 3, it says it's an offense of giving or accepting gratification by an agent. A person commits an offense if he is an agent by accepting or obtaining various forms, including donations. So this is actually very, very pertinent to the current investigations that are going on. And section 50 actually looks at very specific evidence when it comes to the ACTA SPRM. So MECC is actually looking into the 2.6 billion question, as well as one more transaction of funds that had gone into Najib's account. It's much smaller, but this is far more direct when it comes to allegations of corruption. This is the money that has come from SRC International. SRC International had banked in via a few other 1MDB subsidiaries to masuk into the account of Najib, amounting to about 42 million. Now this money is actually very critical because SRC International is a company that had, it's a subsidiary of 1MDB, and it had borrowed money amounting to 4 billion ringgit from the pensioners fund, or what we call KUAP, the kumpulan warga wang amanah. Okay, so this is actually public funds. So the money that we're talking about, the 42 million that was donated into Najib's account, is actually public funds. So MECC is investigating both, the SRC International and the 2.6 billion. But the question before us is, now that with all that harassment that MECC has faced, with the raids, the arrests, etc., and the revelation yesterday by Rahman Dahlan that all this was done because there was a draft charge sheet that was in existence, do you trust that MECC or any other agency will have full independence to now continue investigating? Or are they now cowed by fear, probably find it very difficult to actually carry out the work because there could be more harassment that could be coming up or threats of transfers and so on. And mind you, the transfer of one of the officers was one of the main investigators that were investigating SRC International. So when you harass the investigator, it actually suggests some very serious issues of obstruction. And I understand that some political parties and NGOs have already issued statements asking for Najib to clarify this. If not, police reports could be lodged, and it could mean criminal investigations could convene on the issue of obstruction. So this is actually very important, and I believe that the money trail, the 2.6 billion, it hasn't ended in Najib's bank account. As Sarawak report alleges, it was retransferred out, and we don't know what actually happened. Now, the issue of the right to know, the issue of being informed, has always been a right that has been taken away from ordinary rakyat. We would never know. And whistleblowers who had tried to break the scandal, who had tried to give Malaysians facts, like the Edge.com, Sarawak report, and so on, have also been chastised and harassed. So there are many ways to try to silence Malaysians, many ways to try to cover the lid of the 1MDB. But I believe that this one is too big a scandal. And even within UMNO, I think many of the members of UMNO are probably being shocked, more shocked than us, that all these things were happening without their knowledge. So once again, I think it's really important for us, I hope, in terms of recommendations, to look at some very important things. I know my time is up. The first is to look at a separate fund for public donations, if it comes from various public sources, to actually have a separate fund within every political party. The second is that it must be compulsory to declare the source of the accounts, expenditures, and how the money is actually utilized. The third, to forbid foreign funds for political parties. Now, foreign funds for political parties is quite controversial because foreign funds imply influence from other countries on how the elections should be fixed. And this is really up for debate. Not everyone agrees, so I think it would be interesting to hear from you whether you agree with this. Now, this also includes foreign companies based in Malaysia, whether they should be contributing and so on. In the US and the UK, corporate donations are illegal. So you cannot actually receive money from corporations in the US and UK political financing. So whether that's okay. And guidelines for elections, guidelines for peruntukan and allocations, as well as compulsory to have all accounts audited and properly audited by a recognized auditing company. And the most final and important recommendation is to actually ensure that all financing actually goes into party accounts. So no politicians can receive political donations into their own bank accounts. And I think Minister Paul Lau had actually recommended that particular recommendation as well. So these are some things that have already been going around, and it will be good if we can actually talk about it later to see what works for Malaysia. So it's actually time to regulate political financing, and we all should have a say in how our public monies are spent. Thank you.